Well, you're all very, very welcome to another edition of the Eddie Walsh podcast on business leadership, coaching, and how through coaching you can really get the very best out of your team and indeed out of yourself. Um, I'm delighted. We have a very strong panel today. I have Dermot Gavin, I have Ricardo Banafi, I have Damien Hall, and I have Jessica Nolan. And I'll be going to each and every one of you in a little while to get your take on leadership styles and coaching to get the best out of your employees. But as always, I'll start with you, Eddie Walsh. For people who mightn't be all that familiar with what Action Coach does, you are one of Action Coach's stalwart coaches here in Ireland, but you work one-on-one a lot with businesses, and you get to kind of, I suppose, get inside the mind of a business coach in terms of getting the best out of them and leading their team and all the rest of it. Can you tell us the ABCs of coaching and leadership from your point of view?
ABC is always be coaching, I suppose, but no, I think the nowadays I think coaching and leadership are synonymous. They're the same thing. They're the sporting world and the business world are sort of co-aligned on this, that the leaders in business some years ago that started the coaching model of facilitation and helping players blossom and helping team members and employees actually take more of the, I suppose, the leadership role as well in their business or in their teams. That's been sort of really coming to the fore of late. And I suppose, the Euros are on at the moment. And it's probably interesting that I typically start this podcast with the same stuff about what leadership actually is, and if I just reflected on in terms of the Euros piece that's happening now is like, so good coach, good leader, knowledge of the sport, knowledge of the player, okay, knows how the sport or how the business world should operate in their marketplace, and also know how the particular player should operate. But there's also an element of the personality of the particular player. So how do you get the most from that player? Is the player in the right position, for instance? Are they doing the right job? Is it the best shape of the team possible? Okay. In terms of the Euros, again, I just want to be very sort of contemporary. One of the key ideas in terms of coaching is being able to listen. And I suppose in some ways in the Euros, it's actually probably being able to look and to see what's actually happening, to take some notes about what each player is doing and how it all congregates into this big success or failure. Now, the amazing thing about sport is very quickly we know if we've done a good job or a bad job today. Very quickly we know if we've come to actually put the effort in or not. It's very simple for us. In business, sometimes it takes us a bit longer. Sometimes we don't really know all the moving parts all of the time, and the marketplace can change. It's not as direct or as formulaic as a sporting result to say 1-0, 11 points to 2, whatever that score is going to be. Okay. A few of the things that probably are synonymous with this stuff is passion and motivation. Passion for the game and passion for the team members is very motivational for them. And also I think the motivation piece is that you've got to motivate them in the right way. Okay, motivating them for either the wrong reason or in the wrong direction can be as bad as not motivating at all. And I think that's where you see the key real leaders and real coaches shining, is that they motivate the right player in the right way, in the right direction. Really important. And above all this, I think there has to be a level of integrity behind this, like a backbone of it, that you're pushing players because you've got their best interests at heart. You're not pushing them just to win matches, but you're also behind them to say, for you to step up on the European stage or on a bigger stage, we need to bring you up to a level, and you need to be able to operate at a level where everybody else is a super team member. And what I thought was interesting recently is I looked up last year's pundits for the top 4 managers or top 4 coaches that were coming to the Euros. In number 4 was Italy, Roberto Mancini. In number 3 was Fernando Santos from Portugal. In number 2 was Luis Enrique from Spain. And in number 1 was Didier Deschamps from France. So wouldn't it be very interesting to see how many of those guys and girls or whatever the manager might be are in the top 10 or in the top 5? It'd be very interesting little, these are the best ones going, and do they get the best results over time? That's just a little bit for me there, Brendan, just to
okay, start. Very interesting, very interesting. I'll turn to the panel. First, let's go to Diarmuid. Diarmuid, are you a soccer fan?
No, I feel like a complete imposter here because I'm possibly not very good at business and I know nothing, really nothing about sport.
You know, what's interesting for me,
any of those names.
What's interesting for me from your perspective, Diarmuid, is, listen, we would know you from your work through TV and all of that, especially, but we would know you very much as the personality, but you've got a team behind you as well. So I'd be very interested to know from your perspective, what's your attitude in terms of coaching, leadership, and getting the best out of your team? Because I'm sure it's very demanding work for them, isn't it?
Yeah, in ways I have a team and in ways I don't. So I'm a creative. I'm an ideas person. The way I operate is through designing gardens and through that making television programs, writing books, all that sort of thing. But by definition, because I make gardens that are slightly different and I have a different thought process, or at least that's how I started out, I had to run my own business to do that. I would be a kind of natural entrepreneur, but not a natural business person. I think they're very separate entities. Coaching has affected my life. Building teams is important. At certain, if I have big projects on, unusual projects on, sometimes they'd be very, very challenging projects. So I would build a team and have to motivate them through the period of that project. I have done things like, I'm just finished making a television series in the UK, and I worked with a production company who had never made a garden makeover show before, and I worked with 2 new presenters who had either never done television or just weren't very good at it. And so I found myself in that situation, both with the team behind the camera and in front of camera, in a coaching situation, but one that I didn't really want to be in. Thinking of this topic in advance of today, coaching has touched my life from the earliest days, because I learned that as a gardener, when I was a student in the Botanic Gardens in Dublin, you would get projects. You would generally sit with the family on a Saturday morning. You'd been working in their garden, you'd have a cup of coffee, and somebody in the family, might be the husband, might be the wife, might have a creative job or a business job, and they would give you advice. So they'd give you, just from the earliest days, they'd give you little bits of advice. Other people you worked at, tutors in the Botanic Gardens, there was always things that I picked up on there, and understanding who to listen to, I found was really important for me. If I'm doing, let's say I have an idea for a garden, the biggest thing I probably do is create gardens at the Chelsea Flower Show. And I tend to create gardens that are a little bit different. There are big projects in that they might have an overall budget of between £500,000 and £1 million. And you have a year to prepare, and then 3 weeks to deliver, and then 3 weeks to make, and a week of madness of the show. And you have to manage various groups of people along the way. They may be your sponsor, they may be the show organizers, or they may be the team that you build to deliver a particular project. Just before lockdown, I was planning the biggest garden ever seen at Chelsea, and the most unusual by far that had ever been seen. A very, very challenging project. And I was giving myself a 2-year lead up, and I brought 15 people for a workshop weekend down in County Kerry, some of whom I'd never met. I just emailed and said, look, I have this thing I'm working on. And would you be available to, this is who I am, would you be available to come and meet all these people? And so you put a lot of trust and you expect a lot of trust, but it's to know who to listen to. And often for me, in a situation like that, where you do 3 intense days of workshopping one idea, you present this idea, and then you manage yourself and other people through this idea. It's who to listen to in a situation like that. My biggest element of coaching has been, I worked in television in the UK for years, kind of manically, making program after program on a conveyor belt. And I came back to Ireland 10 years ago, kind of making the shift in my own head from television to business or a sustainable lifestyle that wasn't at the mercy of a controller of a television station. I wanted to be in charge of my destiny. I started meeting business people, ringing up people and asking to meet them for a cup of coffee to look for advice. So that's the main coaching that I have benefited from.
Yeah.
Some were mistakes, others were amazing. And a couple of things, just a couple of things that were said by a couple of people really set me off on a path and showed me the way, despite not being a businessman, how I had to be disciplined and what I had to look to achieve, and creating a time scale and all of that. So it is, for me, deciding, identifying people you want to meet, you want to listen, looking for that meeting, and then listening. And through COVID, it's been amazing in another way. Before COVID, virtually every day was leaving here. I live in County Wicklow, going to the airport and ending up in China, in Newcastle, it could be anywhere. And during COVID, I had to stop this running around, generally getting nothing done, spending a week touring China or whatever, looking at projects that would probably never happen. And the slowdown ended up with me going swimming at sunrise every morning.
Wow.
With a guy from a completely different discipline, a guy in fintech who was on a capital raising round and whatever. And just the talks between the two of us each morning, right up until this morning, understanding his business, listening to him and realizing a lot of the stuff is just common sense. And him listening to me, and I know nothing about fintech. Actually, I know quite a lot now. So it's all informal for me and trying to identify where to take the advice from.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. I want to come back to that later on, because there's a couple of things he said that piqued my interest. And I know from some of the other podcasts we've done with Eddie, he'll be interested in it, but how creatives approach business is very interesting. But let me go down now to Ricardo for a second. Ricardo, can you tell us about your business and tell us about your style of leadership? And you're just on mute at the moment, Ricardo. Yeah. So no matter what you tell us for the next few seconds, we won't hear.
Oh, it was a secret anyway. I couldn't tell you. Well, when I say that, well, I've always been an engineer. I always like to build stuff, to help people build stuff, and there was a strong element in that of wanting to teach people to build stuff, and a keen sense of aesthetics when applied to engineering. So I was horrified when I saw something horribly implemented or horribly built. It offends my senses.
Yes.
And I think that drives also the need to help people build better stuff. And I'm mostly a software engineer now. And I've been leading teams both as a declared responsibility of my job, or sometimes as a soft thing, trying to more persuade them to do what I think is a good idea. And yeah, I think that being a good listener is pretty much one of the things that are very important in this. Many people compare managing programmers to herding cats, and it's kind of that they do whatever they want. They'll go the way they want to go. They also have this keen sense of what they want to do, and innate rebellion against authority, about formal authority. So they don't care if you're the manager. They don't care if you're the VP. They don't care if they're CEO. They'll do what they think is right, and you might be able to persuade them to stand down sometimes. Sometimes you can't. And listening to them is one great way to keep your own sanity when you're leading them.
Yes. Yeah.
It's kind of pointless to try to persuade a cat to do something you want the cat to do.
Have you changed your style over the last few years, we'll say, to maybe to adapt to the type of cat that you're dealing with?
The style of these cats is pretty constant. They have been with us more or less in the same nature since the late 80s, when I started writing software professionally. When I kind of abandoned the hardware engineering, even though I studied to the end. I can design an antenna to save my life if I had to. And I embraced the idea that software was eating the world, and it pretty much did. Everything is software. The camera, the webcam that I'm looking at now, it runs its own operating system and talks to the computer through some networking thing and they both are pretending to be devices. They're kind of not. So yeah, and I'm rambling now. Sorry.
Listen, it's nice rambling. It's nice rambling. I think we'll get back to we'll get back to that as well. I like that. I was lost in your rambling, to be honest with you, Ricardo. I'll go to Jessica and we'll come back then. I want to tie up a lot of stuff that I'm listening to. Jessica, your business is called the Disruptors Agency. It's a marketing company, and I love your title. It's Chief Disruptor. So that's great. What about leadership from your point of view?
I think it's really funny. This topic is something that I can really relate to, because my background is I'm actually a personal trainer, as well as being really into marketing, and coaching is essentially what I'm good at. So when I work as a personal trainer, I absolutely adore. I think the foundation of coaching and what makes a good coach is a desire to help other people and want to see other people win. So when you're working as a personal trainer, I did a bit of online coaching during the pandemic, and you need to want more than anything to see your clients win. It's more important than your business making money. It's more important than your reputation. It's more important than what other people think of you. What matters the most is seeing the people that you're working with win. And it's the same approach that I take with now having a digital marketing agency, and the people that I bring on board. All the guys that are working with me, they're all freelancers. So they come on board, they do a bit of work with me. But the really important thing for me is, what I want more than anything is for them to grow as a result of working with me. So I'm not really, my main focus isn't that they, do the best job for me for the cheapest price possible. My thing is, I want them to benefit from the experience of working with me. And I think, if as a business leader, if you see yourself as a coach, you're going to get a much better result out of the people that work for you. So for me, when the people come on board and they tell me about with myself, my kind of start in business, I started separate things as a side hustle, and I learned a lot from that, and blah blah blah. And so when the guys and girls that work for me, that's who I've chosen to bring on board, is people that I know that have that little entrepreneurial glint in their eye. And when they come to me and say that they're working on a side hustle themselves, I'm not like, oh well, do you think that's going to take away from the work you're doing? I'm like, oh my god, that's amazing, how can I help you, to benefit and how can I help you to kind of spur that on. I really encourage them to do their own thing outside of what they're doing with me. And I think, yeah, when you see yourself as a coach and when you are the leader of a business, like, it's really important to understand that no one else who works for you or with you, if it's your business, no one else is going to love it as much as you do. And no one else is going to work as hard as you work. And you can't expect them to. So I think the really important thing to remember is that, and the most important quality to be a really good coach and a really good leader in business is accountability. So I think people need to learn to stop pointing fingers when things go wrong and start pointing thumbs, i.e. everything that happens is my fault because it's my business. So everyone that works for the business, like if, you know, one of my web designers spends, you know, however many hours, and those are billable hours to my client, and they come back with a website that's not up to scratch, that's not their fault, that's my fault, because I'm the one who's hired them. I'm the one who didn't check in on their work as they were working through it to make sure that it was being done properly. So I think that's probably something that you see a lot of, is when the person at the top of the pyramid, when it comes to the business, like the leader, blames other people for things that go wrong. I think that's the biggest no-no, but you see it all the time. But ultimately, if you are the leader of a business and you're the leader of a team, like it or not, by being the leader, you're taking on the responsibility of accepting complete responsibility for anything that goes right and anything that goes wrong. But the other side of that, and it's a little bit unrelated, but when things go right, like my leadership style anyway, is that when things go wrong, it's all my fault. When things go right and something really amazing happens, I had nothing to do with it. That was all you guys. Well done. You know, that's kind of the approach that I would take when it comes to leadership. And that's how I like to lead a team. Everyone is different and there's no right and wrong, but I've always kind of had a really good result through that way.
Yeah. I think what you're saying is going to be very interesting to a lot of people listening, because you fit within a category of an entrepreneur who's leading a lot of, let's say, freelancers, as you said. They're not quite in your business, but they're working with you. And I think a lot of people who are in that position would utilize it just to get the job done, give me results, get it back, get it quick. But your attitude, I would think, would gain a lot more loyalty from the freelancers that you're working with, and probably because of that, you know, deadlines met, quality of work better. Do you feel that happens?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, like, it hasn't really been done before. And I will preface this by saying my business is still very new, so I'm not going to say it's going to work or not. But building an agency by using exclusively freelancers is something people haven't really done before. And I'm getting a lot of, you know, friends, family, people telling me like it's a bad idea, you need to bring people on board. But I'm a really big believer that the people who are the best at their craft don't want to work for anyone else. They want to work for themselves. So I believe that I can get the best web designers, the best graphic designers, the best social media account managers, etc., by only hiring people who are self-employed. Because, you know, I think from my own experience anyway, like, if I know that I'm good at what I do, I don't want to work for anyone else. I want to write my own rules. I want to follow my own rule book. I don't want people, you know, curtailing me with their version of how things need to be done. I want to do it myself because I know I'm good at it. And I think that's how most people who are the best at what they do will think. So for me, working exclusively with freelancers is a choice that I've made because I believe that's how I'm going to get the best talent. And like you said, you know, there is always the worry that if I'm only working with freelancers, they're not tied to me. So they're free to go and do other work for other people and I can't say anything about it. So that's a risk. But by having the attitude of, I want to give them the really cool projects, I want to help them, you know, a lot of, like, it's funny as well because they're not my employees, and yet I will, you know, I've bought them all tickets to the world's biggest tech conference, you know, all my kind of like my team of the closest people I work with, I've bought them all tickets to this conference to give them an opportunity to learn. My big thing is, okay, you're not my employees, but that doesn't mean we're not a team. So in any way that I can, if I can help them to grow or to learn or to educate themselves, I'm going to do that. So as a team, I also pass on a lot of recommendations of, okay, guys, as a team this week, let's all commit to doing this course that I found on, you know, understanding Google Analytics a little bit better or whatever. So by being a leader, you also need to understand that, like, as a team, you need to all help each other. And and by kind of helping the team and delivering as much value to all of them as possible, it means that they want to be part of this team.
Sure.
And if they go work for someone else, they understand that, like, oh God, what are the guys doing now? Are they, are they having fun without me, kind of?
Yeah.
So if you make it a really positive experience to be part of the team, then you're not going to lose people. They're going to want to stay.
I like it. Listen, we've got a panel full of mavericks. I love it. I love it. Let's go to Damien Hall. Damien, complete personal trainer. Tell us about your business and tell us about your style of leadership, and you can pick up on any thread that you've heard so far and pull that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me on, first and foremost. It's absolutely fascinating to hear everyone's experiences and how they do things, because as Jessica just said there's no right or wrong. I think it's just what works for you and what aligns with your values, what aligns with how you like to do things. So I guess complete personal training, I've been running that. It's a personal training, small group personal training, one-to-one personal training. We have sort of boot camp locations around South Dublin. And I've been running that for about sort of 20 years now. We then branched out to complete transformation retreats, where we take people away for 7 nights to a luxury villa in Lanzarote and show them how to live, healthier, happier lives, how to cook properly, how to, manage their stress better, how to work out, how to lose weight, how to just be happier, and give them sort of more direction in life if they need a kickstart back to happier, healthier ways. So I guess in terms of my background, I've sort of been coached and have coached in rugby for a long period of time. So I've seen that sort of side of things in terms of sport evolve over the last I think specifically over the last sort of 5 years it's evolved. No longer do you get and I'll start with that in terms of coaching, because that's what sort of stands out to me, was there's no longer the stick that coaches would beat their players with in terms of shouting and screaming and this and that. And that's how they think they should or will get the best performance out of people. I suppose the best way now, and what people are now buying into, is actually people are people. And that's the first place we need to start in terms of, connecting with them, adding value to their lives, making them better people, and getting, I suppose, talking to them on a personal level in terms of coaches to players. So you're actually really connecting them with them emotionally. So it's not just a coach-player relationship. You're actually getting to know them. And that way you can sort of build a culture. You can build a nice sort of real tight environment where you're going to go the extra mile for your teammates, for your coach, when you really have that bond. Like, how are your kids today? How's your family? Is everything okay in your personal life? As opposed to just get out there, train, lift weights, eat properly, and I think that is really the way that coaching on a sporting level has evolved. And it actually translates quite well into business, because I would have a couple of personal trainers who would come in part-time and work and take clients from me. I would have a number of staff who would take away on our retreats. And again, it's all about, on a personal level, treating them like you'd want to be treated, just connecting with them on an emotional level and adding value, as I said, Jessica said there, adding value to their lives and hoping that you can help them in any way you can. And in that respect, that's the way I like to coach, in terms of having empathy and compassion with people, because it's not easy at the moment. I think a lot of people are struggling a little bit. So I think making sure you connect with them, having that empathy, compassion, and the last thing is leading, strongly leading with all those other things in mind. So that would be my sort of best way that I think and I would lead and coach.
Yeah. And when you say leading with all them other things in mind, you mean actually performing yourself so that they can see an example to follow. Is that what you mean, David?
Yeah, exactly. So it's not just about, go do this. It's about, I'm going to do this and you can follow me. So as opposed to, do as I say, not as I do. So I'm a big believer in leading by example. For example, my personal training members in my gym, I show them how I keep fit and how I keep healthy. And I, on all my social media, if you ever follow us, it'll be me out running and eating healthily, and also living a life of eating some junk food and this and that. So, showing them the way, as opposed to, just this is what you need to do, but not actually leading that lifestyle yourself. So I think it's important to actually lead the lifestyle you're trying to portray and coach to others as well.
Eddie, let me go back to you. We've heard from everyone. a couple of threads to pull on that I'm going to leave to you to pick up on first. There's a couple of things that interest me through it all, but a very interesting panel today, isn't it?
Very interesting. I'd say there's some repeating things actually in the podcast have been coming up, and it's more to do with the modern version of working or overseeing or leading a business. But I think, Dermot, you touched on a really important point. Listening to the right people. I think just if I reflect back when I heard you saying that, I thought, well, let me just reflect back as being, say, a client of mine listening to me. And I mentioned it earlier about, integrity, being there for them, having discussed it at length that this is the next thing to do, and knowing that when we come back next week, if something goes wrong, I'm on the hook for it too, because we didn't maybe organize it properly. But the idea there of listening to the right person, I think there's a connective piece here, and one of you also mentioned about accountability and having that accountable nature in terms of the business. But I think that's really important, that listening to the right person, getting that right feedback or somebody that's in it with you, if that makes sense. So that's really important. Ricardo, I love the fact about the things offending your sense of beauty, if you like, and that's that's one of the things that I think a lot of my clients, again, when I reflect back and thinking about what you're talking about, is that in their particular business marketplaces, they know what a thing of beauty is. So it could be a product or a service, and it also offends their sense that it's not quite right, and we have to go for quality, and we're pushing to achieve something special. So I think in terms of that's a common thread probably amongst all the guys on this. It's probably not verbalized in that way, but it's as far as I can see and experience with all of my clients that talk about this stuff, that's a real driving force for business leaders, is to make the marketplace better, to make our service better, to make our thing the best it can possibly be. Jessica, one of the things that you mentioned, and we had another person on last week who has a team of freelancers, and I think that's a really important part of how the whole world is moving to. I think every company has some form of freelance, whether it's the marketing team or the production team like Brendan here, or any sort of outsourced team, and managing them in your brand. And as you said as well, Jessica, that bringing them up into producing what your brand says and producing for what you need, that's really important. And you talked a little bit about that. You mentioned the accountability piece, but you talked a little bit about it also about the engaging people. And there's a book called Good to Great by Jim Collins, and it really documents that piece that you're talking about, how great leaders really have longevity in their companies. So they did a long study on what made companies successful and the leaders in those companies, and what you documented there is exactly it. It's about understanding who the team are and motivating them in that way rather than for the business, if that makes sense. So that was really good. Damien, I think just from where you're talking about people, helping them to be happier and healthier, I think that's also part of the general business owner stuff now, is that we've got to make sure that the team are engaged and have morale. And whether it's your clients or whether it's your team members, that we all know that mental health is such an important thing, that coming to work with the right attitude is as important as coming to work with the right skill set, if that makes sense. That's really important. I think one of the other pieces that you talked about the leadership is that the rugby coach, if you like, doesn't really have a stick anymore. It's more of an attraction to a success piece than oh, you've got in trouble for not doing the right thing. And I think that's a really important sort of growth pattern for us as a culture or society in terms of leadership, is that the carrot and stick is becoming mainly carrot. And what I mentioned earlier on about the knowledge of the player in the sport, that's really apparent in that sentence, or that idea, in that if you know the player, for instance, if you know the player is motivated to feed their family or to become famous or whatever, your coaching or leadership can remind them of that at a particular time when their head is down. And just recently, one of my clients had a really good success, and one of his things is buying silver coins. And I said, you can buy another silver coin now. And he was like, I can't believe you remember that. That's just made my day. That the fact that you knew that that was in my head now. The first thing to do is to buy the silver coin. And I think it's just knowing that the player, knowing how to motivate them, knowing what they need to hear at the right time is really important. It's much more important than the stick approach, definitely.
100%, yeah, totally agree.
That's me, Brendan.
Great. No, very interesting. I'm just going to go one more quick round now to everybody on something that's of interest to me from what I've heard. Maybe go back to you, Diarmuid, on this first. I'm not going to put a number on, but you mentioned 20 years of leading teams through productions and all of that. And I think just the topic that seems to have come up is that there's a new style of leadership now that has emerged in terms of the carrot versus the stick approach. Do you see that the way that you manage or lead those teams, has it changed more towards carrot? And if so, is it because of your development, or is the type of person that is now working for us all in general, is the type of person different? Are they more sensitive? Are they not able for the stick approach?
I think as you get a little bit older and you have less time for the nonsense, and you identify what it is, what exactly you want to do, and you, whether it's subliminal or whatever, you just cut out the rest and you zero in on the people that you want to work with. You're watching all the time. You're seeing who's young, up and coming, motivated. You're trying to understand the reasons for their motivation. You work with them in some other project to see how they perform, and then you strike. So that's, I'm more kind of laser orientated like that. I just don't have time to go through the usual. And maybe, you know, unlike Damien, I'm a little bit cruel. I had an office full of 12 designers on Portobello Road in London. And all I found after a while was that I was managing people's problems, not managing people. And when I moved back to Ireland, I kept some of them. We closed down the office gently, and I kept some of them on as freelancers. And what I found after that was the mutual respect increased hugely. I was really appreciative that they were there, and they would often work through the weekends for a deadline to do the work. And they really appreciated getting the job and having me as a client. So the level of respect went up and up. And then the care that you had about them and their situations also increased, but it was a natural increase, because sometimes that hierarchy that develops within an office, sometimes when you have somebody managing an office, sometimes, you know, I often wasn't there, the gossip just goes crazy. So when you know what the ground rules are, when they're working for themselves, you're working for yourself, and you're working with each other in a way that Jessica has set up, that worked so well for me and continues to work well for me to this day.
It well may be the way of the future, there's no doubt about it. Damien, let me skip over to you. Has your leadership style changed over those years then, do you think?
You're on mute, Damien, there.
Oh, sorry, yeah, you're on mute, yeah.
Apologies, yeah. So I would say I've always been quite compassionate and empathetic. So I suppose initially my coaching would have began in coaching sort of kids in school. So it does need to be a little bit, you'd need to shift over a little bit to the discipline side and make sure that you have the respect of the kids and that sort of thing. So I guess in terms of how it evolved, dealing with adults is a little bit different than you deal with kids and things like that. And I suppose in terms of personal training, you're always on a journey where you're learning, you're evolving, you're developing personally, you're building your skill set, you're adding tools to your toolbox, so to speak. So I think over the years, yes, it has evolved. I've probably gone too far one way and had to come back a little bit in terms of what Diarmuid said there. You do need to have some sort of, strict side and be able to be a little bit ruthless when the needs be. But I would say, yeah, it's definitely evolved over the years and will continue to do so, to be honest.
Okay, great. And on that note, I'm going to go to Jessica. Jessica, you've got a great, inspiring style of leadership. But could you ever imagine giving someone a bollocking any of these days if they do an awful mess or something?
I don't know what I give a bollocking, but it's definitely one of the most important things. Like, so talking about the whole kind of carrot and stick thing, you know, I actually had an agency a couple of years back. It was actually a really similar type of agency to the one that I've essentially just reopened it. And the very, very, very first revenue that business brought in, I took and spent on bringing the whole team out for protein pancakes. Now, I was 24 at the time, and so were all the team. So for us, it was a lovely thing to do.
Yes.
And my most important thing was, I need to make these guys love working with me, because then they're going to work really hard for me. So it was not about, you know, are you there on time for the event? Are you doing your job the way you need to be doing it? It was about, you guys are doing an amazing job. Here's how much I value and appreciate you. But it is really important to be able to have the difficult conversations when they need to be had. So on the flip side, yes, I have had to ring people and let them go and, you know, tell them, look, you know, you've done X, Y, and Z, and for that reason, you no longer will be able to work with us. It's really, really important to be a positive force when you're a leader. Like, you have to be that kind of motivator, that inspirational person who brings, you know, kind of the best out of people. But at the same time, it is important that when the time comes to have difficult conversations, you need to be able to do it. So I think both of those are important qualities for a leader to have.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm going to give the last word to you, Ricardo, and to your herd of cats. Because...
Oh, that's scary.
Yeah, it is. It just occurs to me, in your case, you seem to be responsible for people who have a very strong mind of their own, in terms of it's their way only, that kind of a way. So how do you come to an arrangement at the end, and do you at any point do you have to just send one cat out of the herd, or how do you come to it?
So right now, I'm not responsible for those. I'm very happy for that. I have an excellent manager that does that part.
Good.
But when you have to do that, when you have to correct something, especially in these in very creative minded people, you have to do that. They're very determined free thinkers, and they will not accept authority that's imposed on them. They have to respect you, and this is you have to lead from among them. And when you have to correct something, it's extremely important that you be able to do that without creating resentment. Because if they resent you, they will work against you, and they'll work against themselves. If you're trying to help them, they'll end up working against themselves and the common goals you share with them.
Yeah, that's, and I think on that note, we can wrap things up. I think it's a powerful note, never to create resentment. It's just not going to work well for you in the long run. I want to thank everybody so much. Oh, Eddie, you've got something else to come in on?
Yeah, just one other thing, and I think it's a concept that I use with some clients that have difficulty with this stuff, is that if you're too nice to somebody, you're probably being nasty to someone else. So if I just explain that, so if you're too nice to one particular team member and allowing them to do stuff, you're probably being nasty to all the rest of them. And sometimes the rest of them can be 20, 25 people. If you're too nice to people about certain things, you might be nasty to your customer because you're letting them down. And it's understanding that the decisions that you make, and, you know, I fully get what you're saying, Dermot, is sometimes you have to say, okay, hold on, back up the truck here. I need to sanction something here, because when I look at the whole thing, is if I don't stop this bit now, it's going to end up being problematic, and it's better for everybody. And I fully get that. But the concept is that if I'm being too nice, who's getting the nasty bit at the end? Is it me? Is it the customer? Is it the client? It's almost certainly going to happen.
Guys, I want to thank you all so very much. It's been very, very interesting. Dermot, Ricardo, Jessica, Damien, and Eddie, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk again.